Welcome to 5 Good Questions. I'm your host, Jake Taylor. Our guest today is Betsy Atkins. Betsy is a 3-time CEO, serial entrepreneur, and founder of Baja Corp. She's a corporate governance expert with an eye for making boards a competitive asset. Her corporate board experience is vast and covers multiple industries, and she's served on over 27 public boards and been through 13 IPOs. Today we're going to be discussing her book, Be Board Ready: The Secrets to Landing a Board Seat and Being a Great Director. Let's ask Betsy 5 good questions. But first, I'm happy to announce my literary debut, The Rebel Allocator, is now available on Amazon in both print and digital formats. You could say it's about time. I've been pouring my heart into this book for more than 3 years. A well-known SoCal billionaire received an early copy of the book and actually called me to say he enjoyed the story and was adamant that I get it made into a movie. Talk about a surreal experience getting 20 minutes on the phone with one of my heroes. My friend Tobias Carlisle had this to say: Jacob Taylor has written a modern-day investment classic. The Rebel Allocator is reminiscences of a stock operator for value investors. It's a fictionalized retelling of the lessons in The Intelligent Investor in an accessible page-turner. If you want to learn how to invest like Warren Buffett by sitting at his knee, this is the book for you. Wow, how flattering is that? I was blown away when he sent me that. I've created dozens of ad-free author interviews over the last 5 years and never asked for anything in return. If you've gotten any value out of these efforts, please do me a personal favor and pick up a copy of The Rebel Allocator. I promise you won't regret it. And now, on with the show. All right, welcome back to the program, everybody. We have our guest, Betsy Atkins, and she's the author of Be Board Ready, and this is part 2 of our discussion about all things board-related. So, Betsy, thanks for coming back and for this 2-parter.
Great to be with you.
So question number 1 of part 2, and these questions, before in part 1, we were looking at things from being a potential board member, and once you got on the board, how do you make sure that you're effective? This time, we're switching things around a little bit, and now it's going to be more towards if you are a CEO or maybe in management and interacting with the board, how do you be effective from that role? So this should be a lot of fun to get that angle as well. So question number 1, what should you look for when selecting board members if you are actually a CEO that can nominate for your board?
So first of all, I think in today's world, all CEOs need to have a say in who comes on the board. Although it may be done and led by the governance and nominating committee, the CEO always should have a veto. In other words, they have just a chemistry mismatch. They don't like the person. So for sure, the CEO should be engaged. And secondly, CEO longevity directly correlates to changing about a third of the board. So if you have 10 people on the board, if you haven't been involved as the CEO in the selecting of at least 3 of them, likely your longevity to get beyond 5 years goes down. So it's pretty important.
Okay, so you're looking at, is that as simple as having kind of your guys or girls on the board that believe in you and are pulling for you? Or is it that the vision of what you want to achieve maybe isn't matched with if you don't have other people that are, for sure, match your vision?
It's precisely the latter. In other words, you're a new CEO, let's say, and you got brought in because the board believes in your vision. But the board is the old board that's been there for a while. So typically, a chunk of them are not comfortable with change. They don't embrace the change. They liked the vision, but when they're actually doing the vision, they're nervous and they're reticent and they lose conviction and courage. So if you haven't brought on at least a third of the people who understand what you're trying to accomplish, they're on board, they have the same passion and conviction. Now they're going to be open to understanding the risks and being thoughtful, but you need at least a third of the board who's dynamically and affirmatively with you on the vision to correlate to your success and longevity. Now, in picking them, one of the first things I think you do is you look at people who are very contemporary, because the reason that a board and a company becomes irrelevant 20 years ago was because maybe there was financial impropriety. Look at WorldCom, Enron, and now we have Sarbanes, and we have all these internal controls. So companies don't go away because of financial lack of controls. They go away because they're not current, they're not competitive, they're just not contemporary. So with the velocity of change we live in, all board members, in my mind, that you would ever consider bringing on a board today must be 100% active. You can no longer be, in my mind, a good candidate for a board if, for example, you were a past CEO 10 years ago, your playbook is 10 years old, you're playing golf 3 days a week, and you go to your 2 or 3 or 4 boards. You're not contemporary. If you are not 100% active, and you don't have to be in an operating role, but you're working with venture capital, you're working with private equity, you're consulting, you're working with strategic marketing organizations, you're 100% active. Then you bring a contemporary viewpoint. If not, you time out so quickly. So that'd be the first thing I would look at, which is not typically what your search firms and others put as their, filter. I think it's critical. I think also you need to be looking for some people who have deep industry knowledge. You're a pharmaceutical company, you need healthcare people. You need some people who have digital transformation, go-to-market, customer journey knowledge. Because the way you went to market through the detail rep calling on the doctor is not a model that's going to stay, relevant. You need to be engaging socially, using AI and machine learning to target down to a segment of one, whatever it might be. So you need people with that expertise. You probably need geographical, global expertise. Most companies aren't using that as a priority. I think it's really important. Most multinationals do half of their business outside the U.S., yet the board is all U.S. people. Time to, get with it. So those are some of the things that I would look for.
That's great. So question number 2, assuming that I get my 1/3 of the board that's kind of on my team, how do I go about getting the most out of them as the CEO?
Well, the first thing is, as the CEO, I think there's a very programmatic way you should be leading your board. I think you should do a CEO letter before every board meeting, kind of a 2-page letter, what's going on, what are we going to cover in the board meeting, set the framework. Secondly, I think at every level as the CEO, you want to be seen to be the leader. So you want to start the meeting with sort of a State of the Union address. Not a 40-minute soliloquy, but a good 10, 15-minute, here's what we're going to cover. You also need to use your key board leaders. So on every board, there's either a chairman or a lead independent director. And then you are typically 3 committee chairs, your audit committee, your comp committee, your nom and governance committee. Those are the 4 people you need to really leverage as the CEO to get the most out of your board. So you need to designate usually your lead director or chairman to get input into the agenda and to identify on the agenda where you want the board members to engage, because you're not going to control them. They came to contribute. They came to play. And if you think they're going to sit quietly for 4 hours, it won't happen. So if you don't identify the 1 or 2 topics where you want their thoughts and their input, some juicy strategic decision where management has looked at going A or B as the direction, we're thinking it through, we management are soliciting your input and your wisdom. That's a great board meeting where there's dialogue and discussion. If you don't allow them to contribute, they're going to go tangential, they're going to interrupt you, they're going to take control of the meeting, it'll be a kerfuffle, it won't be good. So be thoughtful, figure out where you want the input, and then also I'm a believer in your board should do a little work for you. So I'm a believer in homework. In other words, your board members bring you contacts. They bring you knowledge. They have a Rolodex of business and political contacts and relationships. They should bring their Rolodex to you. They should be willing to mentor some of your leadership team or mentor you. They should do some work. And the people who are overzealous and who are problematic, give them homework.
Keep the idle hands busy.
Have it be an outbound pointing missile, not an inbound pointing missile.
So basically, the keys to a good board meeting would be like nature abhors a vacuum. So if you don't provide some kind of meat for them to chew on, then they're going to come in and try to chew your leg off, basically.
They're going to contribute, and you don't know where, and it won't be good.
Yeah, exactly. All right, number 3. How do you? I've actually heard you mention this when we were talking, kind of as a pre-call before we started interviewing, and you talked about future-proofing your board. And I thought, oh, that's kind of an interesting concept. I've never really heard anyone talk about that before. So maybe you could explain what you mean by that, or maybe everyone else is smart enough to understand it, and I wasn't. But what do you consider future-proofing your board, and then how do you go about doing that?
So to me, this is the most important subject, because the old board model of engagement that we all remember from a couple of decades ago needs to change. There hasn't been innovation in how we engage in the boardroom. So the old model was passive, backward-looking, forensic, internal controls. You need that, but that's not enough. Companies disappear because they're not contemporary, relevant, and current. So you have to the board's role, in my mind, is oversight and future-proofing to make sure the enterprise stays relevant, that you aren't, boarders who said, oh, Kindle, that's not important. That won't impact us. You have to be looking ahead. So to future-proof the board, in my mind, how you do it is you have working sessions. I like a working session at dinner. I don't want to go to another restaurant that's noisy, eating fattening French sauces. Nobody needs it. What we need is to have a working session where you bring in, let's say, an industry specialist on your company's industry. You're a financial services company. What's the latest on digital payments and blockchain? How are we doing this? So maybe a speaker on that. Or maybe you bring in the people from McKinsey and Accenture on digital transformation for engaging on your customer journey, whatever it might be. So a working session, and you have them regularly. You bring in your biggest shareholders. You bring in the outside industry knowledge so that you're working and staying contemporary, I think is very important. I think also the board does this annual strategy offsite now, most companies. Go and visit innovation hubs. Go to Silicon Valley. Go to Shenzhen. Go to Tel Aviv. Go visit your facilities. Don't just, sit in some fancy Four Seasons hotel in Paris and never leave. Go and learn something, because the rate of change is incredible. And, you should be looking to the future for how do you stay innovative, looking annually at who are the interlopers that will surprise you. What are the business models that are going to change, like, working in a gig economy, higher engaging with millennials. Think through the business models, the macro trends, the industry trends.
So would it be fair to say then that maybe one of the lenses as a CEO to really kind of evaluating your board would be, I'm using my board as a keyhole to the world. And so the wider the aperture that I can get through somebody, probably the better.
And you need to bring them along so that they really understand the strategy. And you'll find out who's tracking and who needs to be refreshed, because not everybody makes the journey. And here's a critical thing. You have to refresh your board. As a CEO, you forward hire your leadership team. Some people just don't make that journey that goes from 2 billion to 5 billion. So you forward hire a new CFO or a head of R&D and product development. Same thing with the board. Some of them just aren't going to keep up, and you're going to need to refresh them. And you'll see this. Are they thirsty? Are they curious? Are they contemporary? Or is all of their experience, 1 or 2 decades out of date?
Right. So question number 4, if I'm an outside, let's say like from an investor standpoint, how can I tell if the board is functioning well or not? And I think probably the first thing that comes to my mind would be comp as one of the kind of like magic pieces. Like, all right, are they just rubber stamping whatever the comp plan that the CEO wants, or is there some actual thoughtfulness happening there? What as an outsider looking in at the board, how do we make some clues about how things are functioning?
It's a really good question. It really is, because it is hard to tell. I think, if the company is performing in the top quartile, then you should be, happy. And you should not be challenging any of the different metrics. I think you need to look at a few things like, is the company a growth company or is it a value company? If it is a growth company, then you want to look at, are they gaining market share? Are they bringing out new products and new services? And what's the revenue from old versus new? And are they doing successful acquisitions? Because nobody can grow only
organically.
Now, if it is a value company and it's about, restructuring and cost takeout and dividends, then that's the set of metrics you should be looking at. And so, the mistake people make is not holding up the mirror and admitting, gosh, am I a GARP, growth at a reasonable price company? Or am I a growth company, or have I kind of lost my mojo and I'm a value company? If that's what you are, then be a good value company. Don't reward your leadership team as a growth company gets rewarded against growth peers. And more importantly, stay in your swim lane and have your structures of revenue, profitability, and all of those other metrics in line with the correct category. Are you paying dividend? Are you buying back if you're, a value company versus a growth company?
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So like you're basically kind of evaluating, is the board does the board understand where they are in the life cycle of a company, and are they then following the appropriate strategy that should be executed during that particular phase of your life cycle?
And what you said is true about a life cycle, because when Jim Collins in the 90s wrote Good to Great, 40% of the companies disappeared in 20 years. Now it's 50% in a decade. So, mirror, mirror on the wall. Am I an octogenarian? Is it time for me to go private? Well, just face it. Do it. If that's where you are and that's who you are, then gosh, don't stay public.
Yeah, exactly. So question number 5, what's the biggest mistake that you see management making when interacting with their board?
So the biggest mistake the CEO makes is to not be transparent. Everybody knows when you're holding back. Everybody feels it when it's death by PowerPoint and you've deliberately crammed the board agenda with no time for discussion. You know when you're being managed. I mean, you can't be an adult and not know when you're being manipulated. You know it, and you don't like it, and they're hiding something. So that's the first thing. Be transparent. And you have to engage in between your board meeting. You cannot just let the board show up once a quarter because there's no relationship. And then you as the CEO have no relationship capital. And if there is a problem, and nobody gets the perfect ride, there's always a problem at some point, get out in front of it, call your core, remember your lead director or chair, your audit, comp, governance chairs, call your core of the board, engage them early with the problem, tell them about it, socialize, get advice, get buy-in of how to solve it. Do not hide an ugly problem. Do not surprise the board. Fess up early, get help, and stay engaged and have some relationship with these people who are your board and you need to have a relationship with them, or it won't be good for your longevity.
Amazing stuff. So book recommendation time. What do you have for us this time?
This time I have a very different one. I've lost myself in the year 857. I've gone berserk for the Vikings. And I love this period because in 2 years, they totally conquered all of England. 2 years, totally. So, much longer than Genghis Khan. And, we think we live in this fast-paced velocity of change. Think about England in 2 years, totally taken over. So I liked The Circle of Ceridwen, Ceredwin, by Octavia Randolph. I thought it was an interesting picture of how the Vikings took over, how they stayed cohesive and very tightly coupled as a group, really clear on their mission and purpose, didn't get confused, and you can apply those sort of life lessons to your business, right? You want to be a Viking company that conquers and owns your sector and leads your sector.
That's great. I love anytime we can get a recommendation that's outside of kind of the typical business thing, yet has very clear business implications.
I like that one. Hope you do.
That's great. Well, Betsy, huge thank you for coming on the show for a double header and for giving us so many insights about the board and really allowing us to learn from all of your experience that you've had. And it's a big pleasure to have you on.
I really enjoyed the discussion and conversation. I hope it's helpful for your audience.
I think it will be. And everybody pick up Be Board Ready. If you have even any inklings of wanting to be on a board or you're manage a board or any interactions with the board, I think you'll learn quite a bit and just make you more effective and maybe keep you from getting fired. If you don't have 1/3 of your board as you're on your side, right away, the base rate says the odds are against you.
And the final thing is never put Machiavelli in your boardroom. This is like number one thing. Do not bring on a board member who wants your gig, who's bored being retired and is gunning for you. And by the way, I've watched 3 Machiavellian boardroom assassinations out of 28 boards.
There's always someone coming after the king, right? Is that
Yes, there is.
Well, Betsy, thanks for coming on the show, and it was a real pleasure.
Alrighty, take care. Bye-bye now.
Before you go, do me the huge honor of picking up your copy of the Rebel Allocator, available on Amazon in both print and digital formats. It's a business person's guide to effective capital allocation, told in a coming-of-age story of a college grad who crosses paths with a wealthy Midwesterner. It's fiction for the nonfiction reader. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this interview. If you'd like to support this author and purchase their book, click here. If you'd like to become a subscriber to 5GQ, click here. And I included a couple other interviews that you might appreciate right here. Thanks, happy reading.